Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We'll wait for everybody to get on here in just a minute.
Good morning, all. Good morning, all. It's George Tarlis. I'm joining by audio only.
Thanks, George. Okay, so give it another minute. Get Chief Frazier, Chief Sadler, Todd, George. Here comes Amber. Bob, have you heard from Don at all?
I have not.
Okay. I have not either.
Ryan, what are you doing at Busch Stadium, man?
Getting ready for the Cardinals to come back in town, you know?
You're early. You getting tickets or something? You down there buying tickets? What's going on?
I'm getting some rooftop seats. They're only gonna open up a couple of them.
Okay.
So
Looks like your deputy chief's at spring training.
Oh, yes.
Right?
He's under the rainbow.
All right.
He's a little leprechaun.
Okay. So we're gonna give. Let me just. I'll skip down real quick.
Before we start, I'm in the same room as a television. Are you all hearing any noise back?
Now we are when you talk, but now
I mean, from me, but not from TV.
a little bit. But
Okay, can you turn it down a little? Okay, great, thanks.
all right, well, we're gonna go ahead and Amber, can you hear us?
I can, and I will soon be back at my desk and on video, but I had this other meeting this morning and it's running a little behind, but yes, I can hear you just fine.
Good. All right, we're going to. I'm just reaching out to Don real quick. This morning, I know it's a change from our usual Thursday meeting. So we're going to go ahead and get started. If Mr. Sanders can join us, task force, we'll bring him in. So call the meeting to order. Bob, if you want to just do a roll call real quick.
Sure. Thank you. Alderman Mortland.
Here.
Alderman Allen.
Here.
Mr. Tarlis.
Here.
Mr. Solomon. Let's see, present. And Ms. Walsh.
I'm here, yes.
Present. And looks like we're missing Mr. Sanders still.
Okay. Good. All righty. So we're going to start with calling to get approval of the agenda that has been distributed for March 10th, 2021, Fire and EMS Task Force. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Todd. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by George. All those in favor?
Aye.
Neither say aye. So the motion passes and the agenda has been approved for the minutes. We need the approval of the February 18th, 2021 minutes. Is there any discussion or any change to those minutes?
Move for approval.
Mr. Tarlas moves to approve the minutes from February 18th. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Todd. All those in favor, just either raise their hand or say aye.
Aye.
Okay. So the minutes of February 18th, 2021 have been approved and are so noted. So we're going into our, and I just want to, for the record, Morgan, Mr. Sanders has joined us, and so he is included now. So what the real goal today is our item number 4 is the discussion of firehouse options and staffing. And there's a lot of effort has gone in kind of formalizing what we've done over the last couple months, the last 4 or 5 months, and we're starting to formalize this and put it into documents that we can discuss. And as we had the conversations, we looked at it and saying we need to tell the story to the residents. So lay out all options and what was distributed, not just, if we've already kind of come to an option that, hey, that doesn't seem like it would work well, we need to communicate it so everyone understands all options across the board. And that's been distributed from Mr. Shelton. So, Mr. Shelton, would you like to kind of walk through those? And everybody has the copy. If anybody doesn't have a copy, if you want to let us know, Morgan can resend it to you real quick, or I can resend it to you real quick. That Mr. Shelton sent over those options, and we're going off of that, that second document that he had sent the revised.
And I believe, Alderman, that Morgan will bring that up on the screen for us.
Even better, Morgan. Thank you.
Okay. So if we're ready to proceed, what I'd like to do is just walk through these. Again, as it says on the top, draft for discussion purposes, and just to obtain any feedback as we kind of build the models out. Anything you think we're missing, any information, any questions. After I kind of walk through these, I'll ask Chief Sadler to kind of speak to response times, and he'll have some maps that we'll also share that show the various estimated response times and how the station locations would impact those response times. So what I put for the first option is basically status quo, maintaining the current station that we have on Clayton and Mason with 1 pumper, 1 ambulance. Now, the only change you really see to that, a couple of things, we do plug in to bring back the staffing to 6. Currently, it's a minimum 5. The professionals recommend a minimum 6. At one point, I believe we had 6 there. So that would be 4 on the pumper, 2 on the ambulance. So the numbers, as you will see, we also plugged in to make some capital improvements, as you've heard, for some infrastructure, some HVAC, some additional items that are needed at the fire station. So total of $1.5 million for those improvements. Annual capital, as you can see down below, we're currently paying $167, and that comes up short for our annual capital for equipment such as the pumper and the ambulance. So we've got $200,000 for that, just again estimated, and then operating 4.3, and that includes our current kind of $4 million plus the $300,000 for the additional staff. So that brings us to the 4.6. Currently, obviously, we are paying for all of the fire and EMS expenses out of general fund, but just to plug in and say, if this was a tax, just to make it comparable to the others, to get that 4.6, you would need 53 cents. For the average, this would be a blended, obviously, for the commercial properties, residential properties, personal properties, but on the average annual town and country home, which is appraised at $650,000. That would be an annual cost of $655. And again, that's status quo operating the current station with some upgrades to that station. Same equipment that's there now, just some additional staffing. The option 2, again, for discussion purposes, we plugged in one new station. So close the current station, repurpose that, sell that something, and try to more centrally locate one station. So it would have a ladder truck, which you'll see will increase our annual capital a little bit. And we plug in $5 million to construct that station, $2 million for some land, because the city does not have any land or the fire district centrally located. So the city would find some land, build a station. The cost of that would be estimated at a total of $7 million, $5 million for the station, $2 million for the land. The annual capital, $250 million to include the cost of ladder. And then again, our operating, assuming the 6 people, 4.3, that gives us total cost annually of 5.1. To be able to pay that annual would be 58 cents. And then that would be average per resident on that $650,000 house, $716. Again, that's just one new station centrally located. And then obviously we don't have the $1.5 million to upgrade the current station. Option number 3 looked at a new station located potentially at, say, the salt mill facility and continuing to operate the current station. So we have 1 pumper, 1 ladder, 2 ambulances, ambulance at each location, pumper at 1, ladder. The one-time capital would be the $5 million to build the station, $1.5 million to upgrade our current station. The annual capital, so obviously now we have some additional equipment going into this because we're operating 2 stations. So we have $600,000 in annual capital. And then our operating, we've doubled up our $4 million to $8 million because we're operating 2 stations. Total cost 9.1. In order to get that, we would need a tax rate of $1.03. And again, that average annual cost comes up to $1,272 per the average $650,000. The next scenario is option 3, what I'll call light. So this would be, and similar to what we've talked about, Ladue and Webster, they operate 2 stations. One station has a pumper or ladder and an ambulance, and the other station is just the ladder or ambulance with the paramedics on board to get there quick and begin the emergency medical. So the scenario for 3 light, 1 pumper, 1 ambulance, 1 ladder, we'd have the one-time capital of $6.5 million, the annual capital of $520,000, operating of $6 million. It goes down obviously because you don't need as much staff. You're not staffing an ambulance. Total cost for that is $7 million. Estimated tax rate to get that would be 80 cents, and the average annual cost would be $988,000. So, any questions so far? I don't want to keep rambling if there are questions. Okay. Scenario number 4, the city would build 2 new stations. We'd be staffed with 1 pumper, 1 ladder, 2 ambulances. So each station would have an ambulance, and then 1 would have a pumper, 1 would have a ladder. We would assume to build these on city-owned property. So we would have just the cost of the construction for the 2, $5 million each, gives us $10 million. Annual capital for trucks and ambulances and equipment and turnout gear, $600,000. Operating $8 million. That gets us to the 9.4. The estimated tax rate to get that would be $1.07. Total average annual cost per $650,000 house would be $1,321. So then I have two more. One would be option number 5. If the city were to be annexed into the fire district, they would, as the chief has indicated, build 2 new stations, staff them with, same thing as above, a pumper and an ambulance and a ladder and an ambulance. The current tax rate for West County Fire District is 98 cents. So the average per household would be the 1,210. And then again, as the chief has indicated, the option number 6, in 2024, their bonds will be paid and the tax rate will go down to 88 cents. So that would have your average annual cost at 1,087. And again, there would be no other additional expenses to the city for capital or those kinds of things. I have some assumptions down below. I think most of them I've talked about. The A, $1.5 million are current station renovations. B, we talked about $2 million for land acquisition. C, $5 million typical station construction. I did assume in all scenarios that the one-time capital that it would be financed over 15 years at 3.2. That looks like it's kind of current for issuing bonds if we're going to do some type of bond issue. And then just so we have it on our records, kind of what our current expenses are over to the right. Our operating expense to the fire district is the 3.5 million. That's net of our rent, which is 162 annual. Our capital, again, we're paying 167,000 in capital. We pay the Creve Coeur Fire District 120,000 for their service area, and we pay for dispatch 313 for is our current cost for dispatch. So those are the scenarios I have. And again, if there's any feedback at this time, or as you kind of digest these, if there's anything else you think we ought to build into this, I'm all open.
So I have a few questions actually. And if at any time I'm getting ahead on a future discussion, someone just speak up and we'll revisit it. But when you're saying the estimated tax rate and then the commerce's average per household is 600,000, if we issue a tax, that goes to commercial as well, right? It's not just residents.
Correct.
So is any of this offset by the commercial property, commercial buildings, or is this strictly, we're only looking at the residential and this could actually be less when we roll in commercial?
No, that's an excellent question. So this assumes this rate would be 53 cents across the board. So it would be 53 cents on the commercial, 53 cents on the residential. I'm just showing you what it would cost in the resident.
And right now in Town and Country, the only way we're generating revenue, aside from if we have any buildings or anything we're renting out or whatever, or leasing out, is through sales tax, correct?
No, we also have business license fees. So the individual businesses pay us license fees.
Okay. So my question is, businesses are not going to leave Town and Country if we raise the sales tax. So when was the last time we raised the sales tax in Town and Country, and what is that process?
So our sales tax, now these all assume a property tax,
Right.
because our sales tax is more or less capped out. So we have, you know, a general fund sales tax, and it's at the max that the voters could approve. We have a stormwater sales tax, a capital improvement sales tax. So pretty much any sales tax for operating, the city already levies.
Okay, so if there was going to be any adjustment to that, that has to go back to the residents in Town and Country to vote on, no?
And to be honest, there aren't any that the state would have to authorize additional sales taxes. Now, I don't want to confuse things, but there is some discussion at the state level about the Wayfair, which would be a sales tax on internet sales.
Right.
But even if that was approved by the state, the city would send that to the voters. and it's probably estimated, because we don't know, that's $650,000 a year. Estimated, the city.
So the state has 100% control as to anything. If we want to go back to retirement communities or assisted living communities and have a levy for like a usage tax or whatever for, fire and EMS services or whatever, we can't do that on our own. That has to be done through the state.
Correct. Yeah. The only option you really have that I'm aware of would be some sort of property tax.
Okay.
Yeah. There isn't the legislative authority just to independently.
Right.
tax something.
But what is the reason why, and I could be completely wrong. I mean, I live in town and country, so I see it, but I feel like we have more assisted living per capita than Creve Coeur and Chesterfield and Ladue and all the other ones. What is the purpose? Is it because we have the land that they could build on, or what is the reason? Is there a benefit for them to be in town and country tax-wise or financial reasons?
Well, the benefit would be the zero property tax. So
Right.
if you own a commercial building, you don't have to pay any property tax.
Right.
I assume it's a good location as well,
But for other municipalities that surround us, they have property taxes for commercial.
most do. The city of De Pere does not have a property tax,
Okay.
and Chesterfield does not.
Yeah, so Todd, it's, the cities around us are in different circumstances. Some are in a fire district, some have their own fire department, and they have a public safety tax, and so it just depends on the makeup of how they're staffing that.
Right. And the reason why I'm asking these questions is I don't know if the best vehicle to get this done is to put it solely on the shoulders of the residents who own real estate in town and country, residential real estate. I think that's going to be an uphill battle no matter how much we love our fire, police, and EMS services. We have a lot of people on fixed income in town and country, and then we have a lot of people who, if you say they already gripe about the property taxes going up, and then now all of a sudden it's going to go up another $1,300 a year. So if there's a way to share the burden on that, because on a resident, if my property taxes go up $1,300 a year, I need to make roughly 23, not quite that much, but by about $2,000 to net that. On a commercial, they have services that they charge for, and they can make up the increased costs in their products. So I'm just trying to think outside the box. Is there a way to share the burden on this?
So Todd, this assumes that the commercial properties would pay the same amount of property tax that
Yeah.
the residential properties would.
That they're not doing currently, correct?
Correct. And if they were in the fire district, they would pay the same amount to the fire district.
Okay.
That the same rate, obviously higher value, they would pay more per
Yeah.
property.
Okay. And as far as the bond for the financing on 15 years at 3.2, is that realistic? Because 15-year financing, that's an awfully low rate for a 15-year, that's long-term financing. So,
So what we're seeing is they call them certificates of participation, and bondholders, they're tax exempt. So bondholders are buying.
okay.
Again, that's a plug-in number.
Right.
You can.
Okay. All right. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd. Other questions? Other thoughts?
Yeah, I was just thinking along those lines that we were just discussing on, having some burden shifted to businesses. I don't suppose you could look at the pricing of the business licenses. I mean, I'm sure we've got to be sensitive and careful there, but is that a possibility?
So we do have competitive, we check those, and our business license fees do bring in significant revenue, and they are comparable with surrounding communities. So again, this would, if you were going to do one of these options, it would shift, it would add some revenue to the city from the commercial properties that we currently do.
Sure, understood. But if residents, and I understand there's a lot that goes into this kind of discussion, because when you start about shifting burden more to commercial from residential, then that goes into the future ability to attract commercial, et cetera. I fully understand that, but just so we know that the options on the table, I understand, and you were clear that the tax rate would apply to residential and commercial in the calculation. What I'm questioning is, can you also use increased business license fees as an additional way to generate additional revenue such that that rate can come down and residents bear less?
And so, Amber, I think what may be helpful is if I put together a little chart that shows tax rates and business license fees comparison for a few of our peer cities.
That
So
would
we
be
can-
great, just so we know the options.
Sure.
It's a small point, but this point about cost, I think this is fabulous. I mean, I love all these options laid out. I think this is incredible and exactly kind of what we were hoping to understand. And I am about to pop onto video now because I am back at my desk. But I appreciate that. And this was just one small piece of that, and having that information, I think would be great. Thank you.
And I'm sorry about
real
that.
quick. Some cities have a variable rate of commercial, which is a little bit higher, their tax rate compared to the residential. So I believe that's an option,
Right.
if you were going to do that.
Bob, didn't we look at those in the last year, those business licenses to come up to be more in line with the surrounding communities?
We haven't adjusted our business license fees, but we do on a regular basis compare fees and rates just to be sure we're in the market.
Yes.
Hey, Bob, I've got a question. Don Sanders here.
Sure.
How much revenue does Town and Country take in with business licenses overall every year? Just to throw a figure out there, estimated figure.
I'll look it up real quick, Don. I'll look up our business license fees.
Okay, I was just curious. I think everybody would realize that, I mean, businesses are businesses and it creates revenue for us, but not all that much. I know.
Right. And I think there's two things at play here. One is ongoing revenue for funding and to be able to do what we need to do. And the other thing is upfront costs. So for example, if we build the 2 stations, we're estimating $10 million. One thing that I think we need to discuss is, what are we going to do with our current station then? Because the current station, there might be a way for us to levy that or sell it or something to generate a substantial chunk of that initial $10 million upfront, because the location, from my understanding, and Chief Sattler, you could verify this, maybe I misunderstood, but we're not exactly sold, or you're not exactly sold that the current station we have, we have better options on location. So in your opinion, if we do away with our current station and build 2 new stations at different locations that are more optimal, that would be preferred. So if that's the case, the current station we have has got to be one of the most ideal prime locations in all of Town and Country. So I would think there's a substantial benefit we would have by maybe being creative with what we do with the building. Maybe we create something that generates revenue long term. Maybe we sell it outright. Maybe, I don't know, but we could use that as a bargaining chip or a token to help fund some of the things that we're looking to do, which might offset some of the ongoing costs or expenses. So.
Yeah. Okay. So,
Mr. Chair, real quick, before we move on to Jeff to talk about response times, if it's okay, to answer Mr. Sanders' question, the business license fees generate currently $1.5 million per year. Now, we do know we've had some businesses, office tenants, who probably won't be coming back because of their COVID-related change. So I expect that to dip when we go out for our business licenses. But currently, it's $1.5 million.
Thank you, Bob. And that also brings to point, I mean, we can't support our Town and Country on business licenses. I figured it was a smaller amount. So, I mean, you can't completely tax businesses out of Town and Country is what I was getting at.
So other thoughts on the options? Is there any other options that we need to, so again, our goal is to lay everything out. So once we go to message this and communicate to the other commissions, and then the Board of Aldermen and eventually, the public, that we've presented all of the options and data points that help them understand and tell the story. Anything else? Chief Sadler, I know, Bob and I were meeting with another gentleman, and he said, can we just create an ambulance site? And, obviously that's not realistic. I mean, it's possible, but is there any other options that we're not talking about here that we should put into the discussion purposes? So we're evaluating all options.
I think as we've discussed over the several years and months that these conversations have taken place in this iteration and previous ones, really the viable options are the ones you're talking about. Adding an ambulance resource somewhere doesn't address the target hazards that we've talked about. There's the bang for your buck just honestly isn't there. So that, I think I think the options that have been laid out are the most appropriate ones.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to, just as we're having that conversation, make sure that we have everything on the table.
Well, one quick question, Bob. On your proposals, we don't have anything, I don't see anything about like a police substations or anything. Is that something we're keeping completely separate at this point?
Thank you. Thanks for bringing that up, Todd. I'm just trying to address
Okay.
for our purposes.
Okay.
Chief Taylor, quick question for you. The current firehouse, say it's gone, boom, done. Where would you put the other one? I realize the Salt location is primary for the one on the west. Where would you put another one on the east? Just give everybody an idea where you'd like to have it.
I think the discussions that we've had have all surrounded somewhere in the vicinity of the current municipal center, or just that somewhere between the Principia property and the current municipal center.
Okay, thank you. I just want to clarify that.
So as we kind of digest, these documents and these options, and obviously the funding was where we wanted to start talking, and looking at it, we're working through some more detail in the back end. Bob and the staff are looking through just operating expenses, helping understand to tell the story around mutual aid, response time, just to develop that as we go through each option, and the why behind it, and what's the benefit, and what's obviously the cost as we go through that. It was mentioned the other day, and I don't know if Bob or Chief Sadler, if either of you have any more information on this HB 1016 that's on Missouri State that's going on. That would be the only other thing I think we at least need to be aware of. It's not in our control, but I think we need to at least somewhat be aware of that. That's on the floor at Mr. Sheltner. Can you expand on that?
All I know is that it is currently, I believe, being debated in Jefferson City, and it would allow residents and municipal fire departments to petition to create a fire district. So we do not have a municipal fire department. It would impact communities, I would assume, such as De Pere, Frontenac, Ladue, Richmond Heights, Maplewood, Brentwood, Clayton, they all have municipal fire departments. So if this were to pass, they could then, or their residents could petition to create a fire district. Chief, do you know any more?
I think that pretty much sums it up, sir.
Okay. And
Okay.
real quick, Sue, and just since we don't have our municipal department, we're kind of in that in-between area, but you know, that as those things are looking at it, it's just a discussion point I wanted to make sure we brought up. Sue, go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to point out, we are the outlier in that because it still doesn't address our need. And then I talked to Bob about this yesterday, and the only way that it would be, I shouldn't say the only, one way would be for us to work, and we don't have a full-time lobbyist, and that's not my role, but we would need to hopefully have those words that we were trying to get in existing statutes for municipalities who contract with, because we're still not impacted with 1610. And Bob, if I'm misstating, please clarify. But the way it is, it doesn't touch us. It just touches the surrounding areas. And I don't know. Everything is dependent on informing the public. That would be a point to, and anything to inform the public is very challenging. Probably firemen do it better than some of us at the municipal center, but it would need to be very much, I would think then that would really give a focus of the need for us to be going into West County, because otherwise we're left out there. I'm not saying anything about what I want. I'm just trying to play out the scenarios. What do you think, Bob?
So, yeah, if this legislation passed and if those municipal departments decided to create a fire district, I would think that's a large undertaking because they all have different structures. They all, I don't know, they have varying rates of the fire safety sales tax, and they have varying pension plans. That would be a major undertaking, in my opinion.
Okay. I think it needs to be verbalized and communicated and just noted just as that's on the floor. So we have roughly 22 minutes left, and I want to try to make sure we get through the things that are more critical to keep moving this along. In that other discussion with the ambulance conversation, Chief Sadler, there was some conversation around mutual aid, and so as we kind of go through these areas, we're kind of just trying to paint the picture and tell the story. So just, can you give a little explanation? Right now we have some mutual aid for a small area on the northeast side of Town and Country. I guess it's North Highway 40. But what are the rules of mutual aid? How does it work, and how do you guys operate from that standpoint?
Sure. In our world, it's in this region, it's known as automatic aid. So automatic aid is just, as it's described, is just that. So the system operates basically seamlessly when there's an asset that's needed. They don't have, so mutual aid, you have to ask for permit. You request mutual aid. So if we had a mutual aid agreement, when I needed Bob to come over, I would call and ask Bob to come over, and if he agreed to it, then he came, and if not, he didn't. In automatic aid, it just happens. Okay. So the world that we operate in St. Louis County with 43 different fire agencies is generally an automatic aid world. So everybody relies on aid generally on a daily basis, sometimes multiple times a day. And the world, the way that it functions best is when it's a give and take. So again, if Bob and I are neighbors and we have similar needs and similar resources, or even if we don't have similar resources, but we have we respond on the same things and that sort of thing. When Bob needs help, he calls me, I come, and vice versa. And in the end, it's sort of what we look for is a relatively balanced arrangement. As we've discussed in the past, and I think we can probably show these numbers if you want to.
Morgan, could you go ahead and bring up the mutual aid or the automatic aid? Thank you.
Yeah, and for clarification, just and I'm glad you're saying that, Chief Sadler. When you're saying it, just Bob and do we have automatic aid with Creve Coeur or do we have mutual aid?
We have, Chief, correct me, automatic aid with everybody.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, all right. So I'm using the wrong word. Sorry, my apologies.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So a better way to describe like mutual aid is when if they're like right now we've got a lot of brush fires. It's brush season. It's been a little dry. So when there's a brush fire in Potosi and they need a brush resource like a task force, they'll call through the state mutual aid arrangement. They will call for those resources. We have obviously we have brush resources. If we can supply the resources, if we're in a position to do that, we'll agree to it and send them. If we don't have to, though. In the automatic aid arrangement, it's all of these are basically gentlemen's agreements, and it's because everybody needs help. So we just keep those lines open. And when to your point, the arrangement with Creve Coeur or anyone else is automatic aid. So the portion of Town and Country that is statutorily part of Creve Coeur's fire district, there are times that they cover it, more times than not. West County does from the fire station in Town and Country. There are times where Monarch will cover it. There's times where we will cover Monarch. It goes, there's a constant flow of resources both directions. The reason that the topic has come up is because not only geographically are there some shortcomings, but also, as we've discussed, there are call volume issues. As time has progressed since we've assumed the service in 1983, the call volume, just for easy math, has roughly tripled with literally the same resources in the fire station today as there were in 1983. So when we look at automatic aid and you start doing the math, and these I hope are fairly easy to digest, on a daily basis, there is typically, on average, almost 4.5 resources that come into the city of Town and Country. And on that same daily basis, about a little over half of an asset goes out. So if you just scrub the numbers, it's essentially you've got four coming in and 1 going out. So that's significantly out of whack. Typically what we look for to the other agencies that we, or the other cities, whatever you want to call it, whether it's Creve Coeur, Monarch, or Metro West, or Valley Park, or anybody else really, those numbers are really closer to 1.5, maybe 1 3/4 to 1 either direction in any given time frame. So 4 to 1's a little scary, to be honest.
Okay.
So Chief Sadler, let's take Frontenac, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Are they, first of all, do they ever provide automatic aid out, or are they only looking for automatic aid in?
Oh no, they provide provide
Okay.
aid out.
Okay, is there any municipality that tries to offset their expenses by relying more on automatic aid in than having to supply the services internally for themselves?
There have historically been examples of that, yes.
Okay. All right, that's interesting. That's all I got.
So I just wanted to kind of bring that up just as some of these questions were being discussed. Task Force, what other questions, thoughts that around these items as we continue to digest the options and try to outline the details for not only for future review, but in the end, as the decision's made, everything's being considered.
Could I just point out, so just to clarify, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt anyone. Okay to go?
Yes, go ahead, Sue.
Okay. So we're really benefiting from good neighbors and people around us. I guess that's a question.
Can you expand on what your question is?
Well, if we have more coming in than going out, wouldn't that suggest that we're fortunate that we have more support coming in from others based on this ratio?
I would say you're fortunate as long as those resources continue to be available.
Yes.
Yes,
And that could change at any point.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that.
Go ahead, George.
It feels like how do our neighbors feel about us? Number one, is it creating any relationship problems with our neighbors? And then number two, we're dependent and reliant on others to the point we're getting a free ride in a lot of cases, it feels like. And I don't know if that's an overstatement or an oversimplification, but that's sure what it feels like.
Mr. Shelton, you don't have to comment on the free ride, but can you comment on, do you feel like it is tilted a little more?
It appears from the numbers that, especially from the other resources of West County Fire District, we're dependent on the resources outside town and country than what the average would be based on these numbers.
Okay.
Okay.
For all fairness, though, we're also playing with half a deck, not a full deck. I mean, that some of those other municipalities have other funding sources that are not at our disposal. And I'm sure, obviously, that's what we're talking about here. But, until we find a way, and I can't imagine for the life of me why town and country is not on an even playing field as far as taxes or sales tax or any of that stuff. I mean, until that happens, I mean, we're going to continue doing what we're doing. So, and again, I'm sorry, I keep going back to a couple of things because I have to wrap my head around some things just so moving forward, there's some clarity as to how we get things to reality. As far as passing, let's say we wanted to pass a property tax for this. What is the process for, like, do we have a certain deadline when we have to have that on a certain docket? When is that voted on? Is it every odd year, every even year? Can we do it at any time? I mean, what's that process?
Mr. Shelton, can you handle that?
Yeah, so typically there are several opportunities per year that you would be able to put it on. It would take, legislation by the board. There is a current levy that the city just doesn't levy. I believe it's about 46 cents per 100. And again, that's residential and commercial and personal property that used to be years ago levied. So there is some existing amount the board could just levy. But anything beyond that would have to go to a vote. And again, that could be at any general election.
Okay, so do we need to have it on a docket for an election? Do we have to have do we have to go out and canvass and get signatures, or do we just put it on there?
For a vote for a property tax, the board can just put that on
Okay.
the ballot.
Okay,
The fire district option, which is 5 and 6 on my sheet, would require signatures.
okay,
And Todd, I'd be remiss to say that at least the last time going around the board, I would think most of the Board of Aldermen would still want to take the property tax to the public.
Okay.
So I want to be, we can do it, but obviously I think there's getting that public buy-in is just as critical.
Okay, and for this group, I'd like to point out, and maybe we don't have time for this, but as the Ways and Means had recommended in the late or early fall to add a 10-cent, and I brought that motion to the board, there was not a second. So I don't know how the board, though things change, times change, and boards change, but this is going to be an uphill battle, and it doesn't mean we don't go there, but it will be a significant challenge.
So what, out of curiosity, what was the 10-cent proposal to cover? Was it in connection with a specific initiative?
It had to do with, in the summer retreat, we talked about, we had the projections of COVID and, our decreased sales tax, and then the looking at the continued reserves balance that we've had, the city has worked to keep, and prior was always, well, not always, was prior in the last few years has been significantly over 15%. And at this point, I believe after the 2021 budget, as we are currently, we will go under 50%. But, and we're mandated to have reserves of 17%. So there were even board members who questioned that 50%. But and what that would have amounted to was $125 for a resident home, that the mean resident home of $650,000. So that was, in my opinion, it was nominal. I figured I spent more than that at Starbucks every year, but people didn't want it. It was tough.
Thank you.
This is George. So if we summarize everything we've talked about for months, in the end, in order for us to do anything differently than what we're doing now with fire and EMS services, we have to have a funding source to do it. And the sales tax sounds like we're capped. If we take the property tax off the table for the moment, just for purposes of discussion, because of the pushback, what's the rough breakdown? So we talked about the business license fee being $1.5 million. In percentage terms, how much of our revenue is derived from that tax and business license fees? And the biggest food groups, just in crude numbers, what's the rough? Is there even a path, in other words, to make that up somewhere outside of a property tax?
Mr. Shelton, did you hear all of that, or do you need Mr. Tarlas to repeat it? So,
I'm sorry.
Mr. Tarlas, I thought I heard you say is what is our overall tax revenue currently? Is
revenue period? So if it's in the big bucket form, what percentage of our revenues come from sales tax, come from business license fees, and other?
Right. So the business license fee is $1.5 million. The majority of our revenue comes from sales tax and various, other small fees, and that's about $4 million. So really, what we're spending on fire alone is coming out of sales tax. So
But so
George, you're kind of cutting out, so maybe we might have lost George. So while we wait for George to reconnect or anything else you want to expand on that, Bob?
No, we do, there's some other small, gross receipts, and we have some court fines, but the majority of our revenue is business license fees and sales tax. Right.
Yeah.
So basically, it's 25% theoretically is coming from business license fees.
Yeah.
I think that's what George was getting at. He was wondering that.
Okay. So we have a few minutes left that we have. So obviously our request is to review these documents and we presented them, go through any more detail that would be needed, really to kind of have those conversations. And it sounds like the funding option needs to be outside of the fire district, needs to be maybe the next discussion, Ms. Shelton, and just kind of lay out the budget, lay out the finances, so everybody can see those options. That we've built out the potential solutions that are there, but just being able to take those through, and then at the same time, Ms. Shelton, I know we talked about getting into a little more of each model of a little more detail and cost, but this high level is what we have. Does the task force agree with that approach? Is really just taking up the next meeting, and now that we have the options, is the easy conversation is the fire district, and I know you have 98 cents on here. Chief Sadler, you had mentioned that might be less, and we can verify it and kind of have that in the funding document.
I think Bob has both versions on that document.
He does. Oh, yeah, you're right. He does. I was just looking at the one. So it has those, and then we schedule a call to just go over the funding, and Mr. Shelton, it might help the task force to see the overall, just the high level budget, or at least our funding, resources from that standpoint, from the budget standpoint. If our finance director could potentially help you, that'd be great. Any other requests for the next meeting to kind of get this to the point? Our goal is to get all these items out. It's getting, as we're looking at it, we're getting a lot more questions, which is good. That means the discussion's going the right direction. And, I was asked why now, and what I would leave everybody with is public safety to me, and just overall to our citizens is the number one thing, from the fire, EMS, and the police, to where it's always a time for a discussion for public safety in my mind. It's always a time to say, okay, what's working, what's not working, and how do we develop the solution? We will, and just to reiterate, we extended the current agreement with West County EMS 1 year, which means at the end of this year, Mr. Shelton, Chief Sadler, correct me if I'm wrong, at the end of this year, we have to give notice if we're going to, what our intent is to move forward. We already are contracted for 22, but we need to give our communication at the end of this year. And I appreciate and want to say thank you to West County EMS again for giving us the time to have this bigger, larger discussion, because I think it really shed some light on some things that I'm not sure all of our citizens are aware of. Working with Todd and George alone, just knowing, their eyes opening on those areas. We also discussed, and I have like 1 minute left, we also discussed, after we get all of this together, taking this to the commissions, but also looking at having a third party evaluate it again at the end to kind of look at some options as we work through this. So those will all be conversation points on the agenda next time. Yes, Sue? You got like 10 seconds.
Okay, talk real quickly. When we take it to the commissions, I think they need to be the Public Safety Commission at the same time as Ways and Means, because that discourse needs to happen. And I know I'm running over 10, but I think it's also important to go back to what Chief Caven said about if there was ever a very serious episode, say that right now we're very fortunate we get the assistance, but if everybody was stressed something big, we wouldn't possibly have the assistance. And I know that's negative.
Thank you, Sue. Yeah, no, and we were also going to take it to Public Works just so they have visibility into it. So I'm trying to wrap this up and keep everybody on time. Is there any other items that you'd like to see next time? And if you can't think of them now, please email Mr. Shelton. We'll add them to the agenda for next time. We are scheduled for April 15th, so make sure your taxes are done before this call. 8 a.m. on Zoom. And if there's anything, there's nothing else, if we can get a motion to adjourn.
I move.
Thank you, Amber. And then Mr. Sander, Don, second it. All those in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you all for your time again. And we'll see you on April 15th. And again, if you have any questions or anything else, just let us know. Bye.